That's the Why do I always hit record mid-sentence? I'm like talking to the person and then I pause in the sentence, hit record and realize, wait, what did I just do? But yes, of course. Your new website looks great. Welcome back, Anima Noira, to Magic Without Fears, the Hermetic podcast. You know who I am. Good to see you.
Hey, I'm glad to be here.
What were we talking about? Yes, you the higher self. The higher self, you said. Something good.
The higher self tends to guide us, it tends to be acting as if from the future often. That's kind of how events in my life have often seemed, foreplanned with forethought, like there's intelligent design behind it. And, I caught glimpses of myself acting from future timelines where I actually possess that technology, also from the past, ancient past, where I, appear to have those powers. So I was like, yeah, that explains why my life is a constant tailspin, because like all these future selves and past selves and alien agents, they're all warring over this very timeline. And that's why I've been having one Mandela effect after another, like dozens of times in the recent past. Never seen anything like that in my life. Just minutes ago, I had another one. I remembered a message that doesn't exist on this timeline. Otherwise, it would be in my messenger history. But I remember reading it, and I even remember what I thought to respond to it. And then I opened the conversation with my students, and it's no longer there. And I'm like, well, I should tell him probably because it concerns him, even if it turns out to be just my subjective reality. But since in that conversation he expressed his decision to take up the oath of the abyss, I should tell him.
So yeah, I definitely know what you mean. Of course, like it's one of those things that has kept me so focused on the mysteries throughout my life, seeing things unfold that just don't, that I don't make sense, because how can this unfold exactly the way I dreamed it 10 years ago? It makes no sense. And it if it happens with such frequency as it tends to, if you're paying attention, you want answers. And no one is even willing to ask the questions, at least not in the fields of study that could give us perhaps concrete answers. And I do believe there's concrete answers, because I don't think we live in a supernatural world. As you know, I'm more of a naturalist. I think it's all part of nature. It's all one. It's all God. And but there seems to be, and as an intelligence, this is something I always wrestle with: is spirit an intelligence? Spirits can be intelligences for sure. We even call them intelligences, but is the spirit an intelligence? If there is one spirit of all nature, is an intelligent spirit, or does it exist on? Is it, or when we say intelligence, are we talking about a kind of intelligence that just operates so differently it doesn't qualify as a mundane intelligence in the way, for example, our brains do or we do?
I don't think it qualifies as a mundane intelligence in any way. I mean,
No.
I can push myself closer to that higher level insight only through the use of psychedelics. But then you come down from those trips and you're like, okay, well, we are all one. I just saw it. So, like, what's the meaning of getting out of the bed in the morning? You know,
Excellent.
like, these higher mystical insights are wonderful, and they can fix your, the ways that you have your own head up in your ass, your blind spot, but they are also far from our natural perspective for a reason, because these insights they appear to be like less useful, for us in the lives that we live. There was a conversation that I had with Lucifer when I was coming off of the trip, and he said, the reason why experiencing all these emotions and seeing these perspectives which are repressed, they are on the outskirts of your regular consciousness. Well, they are there for a reason, because they are less useful to you.
Hmm.
So you come here to visit them, to broaden your consciousness, a state of heightened consciousness, it's called, or like broad awareness. But it's also, if you were in that super broad awareness where all is one, then I guess, like, what's the point of playing the game and reincarnating and stuff? And I want to play the game. Like, I like it here, I don't want to stay there. I don't want to
Right.
go back to one.
Well, yeah. So there does seem, especially of course in psychedelic states, it's very easy to experience that all is one connectedness. And it's even easy to have some understanding of how like pluralistic realities could operate in unity, having crossed that abyss of dichotomy and paradox being something that, is transcendable metaphysically from this
Yes.
realm. Right here we're stuck in Aristotelian land of non-contradiction, right? If something contradicts this, then this isn't true. That's just how it has to be here. um if you sort of, yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, no,
from a
no,
strict
I get it.
logical
I mean,
point of
in
view.
my ordinary self, I conceive of reality in this primitive way. Like it's me, that spirits, they are above me. I need to petition them to get shit, or like they're playing me, they're bullies. It's a very simplistic medieval kind of perspective that we hold in demonology. And when you go into those states, the Luciferian God mind enters me, and we are actually one. And then it speaks to me by embodying like an ex or an ideal lover. And I communicate with him from the position of the subject. And then it's just like everywhere. And in that state, you can even cycle through these perspectives, just like in some dreams. You can either see from a bird's perspective, you're experiencing the dream as an observer who is kind of omnipresent, or you can shift through different characters and you identify more with certain persons in that dream. So in psychedelic state, you can even like do that intentionally or semi intentionally. So it definitely helps to snap out of um, the ego. But then you ultimately come back to yourself, and here you are, and you need to work and pay the rent and interact with the government and with other people. So what good is it to see that we are all one, right? Like you need to pick a character and play it still.
You got to play the game.
Yeah.
And if there is if our higher selves or divine genius or whatever has a plan for us, we just don't, in this body, in this mind, don't, as get the memos necessarily. And so we get to have this adventure of wandering through the darkness and seeking the light,
Absolutely.
which
And
of
I
course is a
and
different
I
light
had
for.
visions, very, very particular visions about this, where I am basically seeing that I'm a tourist who signed up for a pathworking of hell, the classical Dante's Inferno. And as I am leaving the Ring of Pride, the deepest, horrible place to be, I spot that I have this guide in a hood, like the hermit figure from the tarot, and it's Lucifer himself, obviously, and he holds this lantern. And I'm like, wow, so this is what's going on, right? So I think we all signed up for a particular tourist experience, so to speak. And that's why we appear to be making our way through the dark. And yet we always get the signs. Like we are never like stuck in the dark without any message, without any guidance. The light bringer is always there.
Yeah, it's the hermit, not Lucifer. Just kidding. The hermit, of course, very much is a Pythagorean figure in the tarot. And one of the things that interests me about talking to you, because this is our round two, and of course you're in the top 10 most popular episodes ever. I think you might even have be in the top three right now. And that sort of stuff is definitely part of the game. Hey, that's
And
not
that's
just a game. It's just
interesting
a bunch of.
because I
It is
remember.
interesting.
So in the previous reality that apparently also doesn't exist anymore, you told me just a few weeks ago that my episode has absolutely tanked, and now you're telling me that it's trending. So wow, well, that's interesting. Who switched off those two realities?
Yeah, no, it climbed up steadily, and it's I think it's still probably in the top three. I think part of it is, of course, the popularity of the work you do on your own, of course. And I mean, and the other part of it, I think, is probably that people were interested to hear someone who's like, overtly Christian, right hand path kind of person talking to someone like yourself, who's you know you are who you are. You need no introduction, I think, at this point. And of course, people can go check out your work for themselves. And your new website's awesome. We'll talk about that more in a bit. But I want to come back to what you mentioned about Dante. And this was one of the things you said you wanted to talk about on this. So I looked at an article on your site about it, and there was the I think it was a recent one. But yeah, the idea of this world being heaven and hell, of Lucifer as the light bringer being like, some people want to see these characters as interchangeable, like, oh, you could worship Lucifer, but it's the same thing as Jesus from a certain perspective, right? Same thing as Pythagoras from another perspective. But we don't, of course, want to conflate them all together, because that doesn't really work out in any way, not intellectually, not spiritually. Maybe it makes sense above the abyss. Maybe it all makes sense in the divine white brilliance of Ensof or Keter. But down here in the mucky muck, we got a difference and distinction.
I love the insult that occultists use to refer to the mundane, the profane, or Malkuthian.
Oh, it wasn't meant to be an insult. It was meant to be when I say mucky muck, I mean, like, that's the beauty of this world, is the mud, is the dirt, it's the earth, it's the plants. The corporality is what's so special. I mean, looking at it even from a very parochial tree of life point of view, the idea of the rapidly spinning point slowing down into matter to express God's glory in even greater form, as impermanent as it is. I mean, what a mind-blowingly beautiful concept. If you were just to share that with someone who'd never heard it before out there in the wilds of the world, right? What a powerful idea. Is the dump truck so loud that you can hear it? Is it dominant? Should we pause for a second? I've been told in the past that actually some people can't even hear those sort of sounds.
No, I'm fine.
Okay.
It's so funny that you refer to this industrial humming sound, because that's how Samael manifests to me. And it now appears on every single phone call that I have with everyone. That industrial humming sound. It has different origins, but it's always there. You're the third person that I'm talking to today where it's appearing.
Well, it's 420. That's when they come to do the garbage, apparently. 421.
Yes, I have invited Samael to do the garbage in my life. That's kind of what he's known for, right?
Mm-hmm. One of the interesting things about Samael that escaped a lot of modern magical books due to lack of information is there's sort of been a bias in a lot of circles, especially some of the Golden Dawn worlds, about Samael being listed as a Klipo, right, as a demon and an evil force, the liar, right, Samael the liar. But then, with the resurgence of missing Golden Dawn literature through people like Zaleski and others, we discovered that the role of the Hieros in the Neophyte temple as Horus changes throughout the initiations, and is sometimes even Samael, I believe. So that just sort of throws the idea of this being a dark Klipothic force right out the window in that realm, in the realm of
in my personal gnosis. In my personal gnosis, and this fits some older, Talmudic lore, he is said to be the one who planted the tree of knowledge, who orchestrated the fall of man. Lucifer was just the talking snake. Samael came riding the snake, so he was like using, this other spirit or this medium to enact his own design, his own plan. And that's kind of where my personal gnosis goes. Like, he is here for the big shit. So I would totally see him as the one who starts the higher initiations. That's kind of where I find myself to be now, having abandoned low magic completely, spell work or, manifestation. And yet the reality seems to be shifting like so fast, all these Mandela effects. So it is like being torn away from your surroundings, even from your body. And, it's this rising, it's like being taken with an elevator, but it's like a force of nature. He doesn't even appear to me in a humanoid form, but like a hurricane, like a sound of the airplane landing, something massive, something non-human and kind of majestic.
Beautiful. Beautiful, yeah. Well, with the I mean, Samael really is just from I guess a grimoire point of view, an angel of Mars in some ways, or an archangel of Mars. And often
Well,
equally,
yeah, he was
does it,
equated with Nergal, the lord of the underworld, who was, the spirit of Mars in those Near Eastern cultures. But he has so many titles. I recently looked it up, and he's, called the angel of iniquity. He's the angel of death. Then he becomes the lord of the Shaitans, like the leader of like all the Satans, the arch Satan. And in this capacity, he is addressed as the king of hell or the duke of hell, in some alleged medieval sources. So
yeah.
I guess you could perceive him as a lot of different characters. There definitely seems to be tension among the practitioners, whether he is an angel or demon or both. And there seems to be some sort of agreement that he, Lucifer, and Shemyaza in particular would be considered both. Like they actually retain both forms. I have definitely communicated with Samael the demon, the Duke of Hell, the Archangel of Mars, but then with something that was like beyond, that was just magnificent and ancient, and it seemed to predate hell itself or like the presence of Lucifer. So that would, and I think you can perceive these spirits on the level where you want to or where you're ready to. And they kind of tell me this all the time, like, okay, look, you can do the parlor tricks. You can take another pact with Samael, the demon, that you have finished, a decade ago. You gained the stuff that you asked for, you paid the price for it, but you don't necessarily want that again. Like, you want the higher mysteries. So why don't you drop your conceptions of my grimoire self, or even me as the Archangel of Mars, and just experience me as the dark joy of life itself?
How does, in your mind, as you say, turning away from, say, lower magic, focusing on higher magic, how does that connect with the idea of, as you said, Earth, this world being hell? So I'm sort of curious how you see those, how do you navigate those two maps and how you parse them metaphysically?
I think the big thing happens in the gate of Tifereth, the Black Sun. The union with the Black Sun is what I've been seeking for a while. And I've had visions, mystical experiences that seem to confirm this. I had this Black Sun form in my second and third chakra, and then it started expanding and rising within me. So I think that's where I would put it, like on the tree of knowledge. But really, like speaking in mundane terms, it's when you become pissed off at trying to abuse magic to cause external change, to sway the circumstances in your life or the people, or just to gain something for yourself or soothe something, avert something. When you get profoundly disgusted of trying to use magic for all those means, that's kind of where the high magic gate opens. Because before you reach that step, and everybody needs to get there on their own, like you're not rising, you're just filling some hole in yourself, some ego. And I don't think that necessarily all those who claim to be on the path of mysteries, the high magic, are actually on it. That they might be fulfilling their vanity, or being lost in some other ring of hell, not knowing it. That's the whole joke about hell that is told in the old paintings. Those people don't know that they're there. They're just like, lounging, having fun, not realizing is in a cauldron that is surrounded by the devils, who are having a lot of fun manipulating their little matrix. So until you wake up and actually leave, you're playing a game and you don't realize that. And you can be the most potent magician, the most self-actualized Magister Templi, and you're stuck in some cauldron in, the Ring of Pride, in the Department of Vanity.
Well, you definitely are if you're calling yourself a Magister Templi, I'd say. Though that's coming from someone out of a system that has those grades. Though of course, I don't know who still cares about grades and titles at this point. I mean, it was sort of a thing, it seemed to me, when we knew less. I think like during this, I was thinking about this the other day, during the times when we had all these more rigid systems and structures coming together over the last, hundreds of years, like let's take from monasticism up through the Golden Dawn and OTO and Crowley's orders, right? And all the 20th century orders. They had all these elaborate grade structures to develop and point out accomplishment, but also knowledge. Often it was pointing out knowledge primarily, in many regards.
There seems to have been a big change even like the past 20 years.
Yes, that's what I'm talking
in
about.
Western occult, and society has changed profoundly. So it's just a reflection of it. Back then we were all hunting for teachers, grades, initiations. Everybody wanted to join the right group, and we all thought that that's what it boils down to. I think a more individualistic, personal gnosis based approach has taken deep root nowadays, and that's probably because a lot of information is available. Publishing has exploded, the distribution of those books, the internet, big thing. So the gatekeeping does not work like it did anymore. Plus, aren't all the secrets of all the orders on the internet, right?
They're not. I wish they were.
Okay. Well, then there is still mysteries for us to dig, which is good. Like,
yeah, it is, right? It is. I remember a long time ago, like over 20 years ago, one of my friends was questioning whether he should continue spending time practicing magic or not, and studying these things or not, because that's a question that an early 20-year-old man would ask themselves when trying to decide how they spend their valuable time. And the answer he came to was just life is better with it. The world's more interesting with it, and I enjoy the world more.
It gives us fulfillment that is not easily replaced by any other endeavor, even though I'm guilty of dissuading young men from the occult. Like I was genuinely sad and torn when one of my old friends, who I always saw him as like the trophy boyfriend, like the most handsome one in the class, the one best in sports, the one who was destined for some glorious career. And then he grew a giant beard, bought some house in the woods, built an alchemical laboratory there, and left society. And I'm like, don't do this to yourself. Like, you should get married and have children and like be the champion. Don't lose your life in the pursuit of the occult out there in the woods. And then he bought 2 wolf dogs, and I know that, okay, well, he's chosen his path. But I genuinely felt like semi-guilty for ever encouraging that.
Once you buy the wolf dogs, it's game over. You've committed. Right. Yeah.
No.
Well, it's like
you
having
can't go back to society with those animals.
I bet. Yeah, I think you had the right idea, though, trying to dissuade people, because it is something you should be dissuaded from if you can be. And I don't say that to make a special example out of esoteric practices, but I would say the same thing about writing or music. I mean, you're an artist too, right? So like, if someone asks me about becoming a musician or a writer, the answer is clear. If you can do anything else, do something else, right? But for it to work out as an artist, you have to not be able to do something else. You have to need to only do
and you have to commit yourself to it and bind yourself with the oath of the abyss, to follow your destiny and reject every other path. And that's a hardcore thing. And I believe maybe that's where the major arcana, the higher mysteries, that's where they start. When you really start caring only about your true destiny and not your ideas. Like, you have wasted every option, every distraction. You have, you know, gone through every vice and every shortcut, and then you're like, well, now it's time for the real shit, because I don't have, you know, the time is limited. Perhaps it has something to do with aging, but it comes at a different point for everyone. Like, you suddenly get this fear almost that you will lose out, and you just stop pursuing the path of uselessness.
Path of uselessness. That's how come that frightens me and sounds optimistic at the same time.
Because it's real. I had a friend back in the day who once had a bit of a meltdown before me. He felt like humbled by my attainments, I guess, or my insight. He was older and I was a woman, so I guess it was hurting his male ego. And he said, he took a picture for me and he said, this is, you know, 10 years of my magic journals. And he had all these journals lined up on that piece of furniture, and he proclaimed them useless. Like, I have kept all these journals all these years and I learned nothing. So now I'm gonna toss them, because the answer does not lie there.
A lot of people told me to burn my old journals. And
I
so,
do it. I
so in,
discard mine, because at the end, like, it's a tool, and becoming attached to it, I think, would be wrong. I have only decided to keep one out of maybe 10 volumes from the past 2 years. And it's because it's like the only sentimental memory I have of my marriage. That's the practice that we recorded there together. So that's why I decided to keep it.
yeah, beautiful. Yeah. Well, as you know, I didn't burn my journals. I decided to make YouTube videos out of them. That's another
You
way to
decided
go.
to immortalize them.
Well, no, so yeah, like the fact is, when I started, you know, I always sort of eschewed having a circle of personal students, but you know, after 40, it seemed to be sort of okay. That was definitely Rudolf Steiner's thing. He would always say, you know, you can't do that before 40. It wasn't because of a Kabbalah thing at all, or you know, where you start learning Kabbalah at 40, which most people did start learning Kabbalah long before 40, for sure, throughout history. All the great Kabbalists are like 23 when they write their masterpieces and stuff like that. That might not be entirely accurate, but it's not far off. The idea that like, so the idea of your journals being useless, like your friend said, right? Like, I've learned nothing. Like, that's such a, if you don't feel that you've learned nothing, that then you have learned nothing. You need to feel, you should come through it. If you've come through at the other end, you feel it's like when you're finally freed from trauma and it no longer triggers you.
You know, I understand his wrath though, because
Yeah,
it's
totally.
like you feel like you've been a fool, you know, that you've been proven wrong. But this is again you fighting your pride, which is, it's the mother of all sins, you know, it's the spiritual blindness, the self-delusional entitlement.
Yeah,
And for me, you know, having those journals and keeping them and accepting myself, even though all those spells didn't work out that I recorded, even though all that divination that I noted down didn't come to pass, you know, even though I missed out all these meanings that were obvious, like, it does make you freaking angry, because it's a mirror. The
yeah.
journal used to be called the Book of Mirrors in Wicca back in the day.
Hmm. Yeah, I get what's been rather than seeing myself as having learned nothing from them and having them just be sort of a artifact of the past, I thought, I discovered that, you know, there was value in going through them and seeing my mistakes and talking about them with others. So, you know, using them as a teaching tool and, you know, say like, oh, see how I didn't include any of this information there? That I think, looking at that now, I think that's insane. And you know, and now looking at, see this long paragraph, how I described this, all this stuff, and it took up like a third of the entry. I wish I had that. None of that matters. I should have focused on talking about this and recording this. To me, that's an incredibly useful thing. And of course, I'm a teacher, so that's what it's my vocational calling since I was basically born, is I just love the entire process of education, the whole circular element to it, and the whole process of, like, birth and learning, and then destruction of what you know, then reforming. It's beautiful. And so yeah, so that's what they're for, I guess. The discipline is the most valuable thing I found I got from them, as well as being able to see what things worked well and what things didn't work so well. Like I was going through one journal and I was looking at the rituals that led up to the biggest challenges I had. Yeah, like I had one real crisis, one sort of magical crisis during all my years in training in the Golden Dawn. And I was like, I never, I lived through it. So I never went back to see what was the ritual work leading up to it. And sure enough, I flipped a page and I saw something. I'm like, what the fuck is that? What
Oh
the fuck
yeah.
is that? And I can't believe what I fucking did. And
there's nothing like realizing that, some major tailspin fuck up in your life was actually fully evoked by you with a certain magical working, unforeseen.
someone said, no matter what, don't do this. And guess what I did? This.
I know what that feels like. That's what we do, like magicians, right? Black magicians and white magicians alike. Somebody tells us, don't do that shit, and we're like, says gates that should never be open. Let's do it.
It was the one and only time I did that. So yeah, learn from my mistakes. If people tell you not to do something, generally you shouldn't do it. But of course, at the same time, we're children and we want to touch the pretty glowing element.
Yeah.
Or like, I remember once I was reading my mom let me have the nightlight on really late once when I was 8 and I was reading my book late at night. And for some reason, I just saw that there were scissors on the desk. So I picked it up and cut the light switch while it was on. I think I was 7 or 8, just to see what would happen. It was pretty scary.
And
I've not fucked with electricity since
that's
then.
a valid motivation to do something just to see what happens, because it's all about that experience. That's why we incarnate. That's the whole point here. You're just filling in the puzzle.
I think it's significant. I like the fact that in the medieval period, spells were called experimenta.
Oh, experiment. Wow, that's so beautiful. See, if I had approached it this way, I would never become so pissed off, because I approached it as a, maybe I should have approached it as gambling, which is how demonic pacts were explained to me by Mephistopheles recently. It's a bet. A win is not guaranteed. You play to get the chips to play the game. And then you discover things, and some of your wishes work out the way you imagined. Some work out in a way that you had never foreseen. But it's a bet. You buy the Kinder Surprise. They just plant the eggs. So maybe I should think about it this way from now on.
Yeah, I mean, it's not meant. I don't think the Latin word for it was meant to imply everything that the word experiment today implies. Maybe you would. I think a Latinist would be the only one to answer that definitively. But yeah, I mean, John Dee called his spells actions. Generally, things were called experimenta back then, and I think he didn't call them that specifically because he wanted to distance himself from witchcraft, of course, so he wouldn't get killed. But yeah, the mentality of experimentation, even spiritually, I think is a healthy one. It's yeah, it's the approach I certainly take. And once you do know how to do things safely, you're usually pretty good. Usually pretty good, I think. In terms of hell, if if there's more to say on Dante and the rings of hell, I'm curious about your ideas of this, about how this world is hell. Why can't this world be heaven?
Oh, well, we live in duality, right? Heaven and hell are organized in mirroring each other, and then they mirror the human society in some way. Like, from what I have discovered, every institution created by man basically mirrors hell, you know, whether it's some of the more obvious ones, such as jail, or the courthouse, or high school, or the strip club. You know, a lot of times practitioners have these dreams about being in hell. It's embodied to them as some kind of profession or institution that they hate, that they have to do it. Like, one of my exes was dreaming about working for the county as a social worker again. And his superiors appeared to be Lilith and Hecate, you know, and Hecate showed him mercy, but Lilith had no mercy for him. So he woke, you know, he wakes up sweating like from the worst nightmare. I've had a female practitioner tell me that she was dreaming about being stuck in some version of hell where she was like forced into prostitution. I was certainly, you know, being privy to like the underworld of the strip clubs and that whole industry in this country. I could totally see how that would mirror the institutions of hell. And then, of course, there is the government bureaucracy, which is perhaps the most infernal of all institutions. It's so absurd what goes on in there. But even anybody who has worked like in healthcare or, you know, education, the army, the police, anybody who gets into the system, a particular institution of society, and stays there long enough to wisen up, they will begin to see the diabolical nature of it, how it just perpetuates suffering. It doesn't fulfill the function that it is supposed to fulfill. It does something else completely, you know. That's kind of the general idea behind it. And like, hell is here. It's obviously not a place that you go after you die, or, you know, it's some place underworld, or that you need to slip through the cracks of some interdimensional gateway. It overlays this reality.
Yeah.
We're in it.
Yeah. It's so true. I mean, even thinking about my time working in the church, one of the biggest conundrums I found right away, and I had a job working for the church just before I graduated, and you know, had things gone differently, I probably would have taken a church and been a full-time priest in the church, but instead I was working as a director of youth ministries, and the conundrum was hellish. Kids would come to you. Like, the first day I had 2 kids come to me and tell me in the sacristy about sexual abuse with the previous director of youth ministry, who was a 20-year-old girl, and the younger boys right away.
So
in the fact, this 10 and 12-year-old girl, yeah, our previous one used to go and close the door and make out with the other boys in there. And I was like, okay, just, you know, I'd been trained, so I took it as it came. I didn't react or anything. It's like, all right, oh wow. Oh, you know, first thing I did have them do was then put a big window in the door of my office, and the guy looked at me, the landlord, the Dutch guy who handled the building looked at me with the wide eyes, like, oh yeah, okay. You couldn't believe how quickly I had heard these things. Like,
oh wow.
and then when I heard
so
more things,
you were thrown in hell pretty fast.
but oh, that's not the hell. That's just life. That's just life, unfortunately. And I don't mean to minimize that at all. The hell is when you can't then report it because some of the parents of the kids involved are on the church board, and if you report it, you get fired, and then you can't work anymore.
Oh yeah, man. No, that's
the hell.
institutional aspect
No
of
action
it. That's
possible.
hell.
There was nothing
Like,
I could do except just leave, or
yes.
become a.
Well, that's the point. You have to
accomplice.
leave that ring. You have to leave that cauldron, and, you know, realize what is holding you there.
Yeah.
And
Fortunately,
when
I
you
had a
leave that,
PhD
mindset, when you leave that ambition or that vice, you know, that pattern in you, you're released. You cannot fix it. It's like the mythical, you know, like the labor of Sisyphus. It never ends, and it can never succeed. It goes on and on in circles. That's why it's called the rings of hell, because things go on in circles there until you snap out of it and then leave.
I often in my imagination just visualize as an exercise all of the Klipothic tree just in Malkut, just like compressed into Malkut, and think about it that way. I like doing weird things with the tree of life, flipping them around on its head just to see how it changes the way I think about things and see if there's any
I
insight
think
from
you're
it.
totally right. I think all the hells, all the cliffs are condensed around us here, you know, and that hell of religious hypocrisy of the false prophets is definitely one of the deepest ones, because where else should we be finding truth if not in the spiritual pursuit, in the spiritual institution? So when you realize that it's, you know, occupied by high level demons, and that it's all about pretenses and keeping power and money and keeping people in ignorance and keeping some dead traditions alive and just perpetuating something that nobody even knows anymore what the original purpose was, well, you know, that's a bummer when you wake up to that.
It is, I guess,
I
kind of.
was was fanatical about being a priestess in my early 20s, just like you were. You know, I felt the calling and I was recognized as one with talent. So different churches, different orders, they all wanted me, you know, because they want the pretty front face, they want somebody charismatic that people would follow. But I left them all because I remember precisely the moment that it kind of dawned on me. I was organizing druidic local groves at that point in time. And it was when I was fulfilling one of these quarterly reports, because we were actually a church recognized by the state. Something that back then we really wanted to be. Nowadays, it just seems to be, to me, it just seems so ass backwards that we wanted to be recognized by the state, like to have this legitimacy, to feel that, like, you know, like we're worthy. It just seems so childish. But anyway, 20 years
Yeah.
ago in the pagan community, it was a big issue.
It was everyone felt that way, I think, in the 90s.
Right? Nowadays, I'm like, what? I don't even want to become a citizen of this country. So I was filling this quarterly report, and it had like a few compulsory aspects to it. And the most important one was you had to report all the activities that you did aimed at recruiting new members. And it was at that point where I was like, okay, so we're basically proselytizing just like the Christians? Fuck that.
Yeah.
Because, you know, it was presented to us that like we want to bless people with the mysteries. That's why we had to master the art of doing a public ritual to get the laity and everybody involved. And I learned a lot about liturgy. You know, it really helped me facilitate circles, witches' sabbats. I was doing it for years. You know, how to appeal to all the senses, movements, music, visuals. So I became a good sacred performer. But you know, then I realized that actually, well, why do we need to recruit people? Like, why should we be like advertising ourselves and our worship and our mysteries? You know, shouldn't those who feel the call like find us on their own? Why is the number of members and keeping them and attracting them a measure of like our success? So it dawned on me that any spiritual institution, any order, they will never be aligned with the goals of an individual seeker, because they will always be A, recruiting new members, and B, collecting membership fees. And then, you know, when they grow big enough, they will become a bureaucratic nightmare of administration.
Yeah. Hell, okay, I'm with you. I mean, I think anyone who hasn't declared that this world is just freaking hell is lying, right? Most of us have said it at one point or another. It's a human experience, and we have to go through the klipo, right? I mean, they're husks. They're husks, right? They're husks around the grain or the wheat, and whether you see them as the chaff that to be you know, transmuted and cast aside, or whether you see them as some sort of, I don't know, let me put on my clipothic mage thinking hat, which I'm, is meant to be ironic for those who are new to this channel. Like, what if the husk is just a, outward or above manifestation of the true kernel, right? And then that thing in between is the illusion of angelic light or divine goodness of the sphera. And I'm because there's a lot of creative thinking going on in the left hand path black magic Cliffoth community, if I may be, if I can state the obvious, right? And that's what I like about it, actually, is the creativity of it. I wish there was a bit more historical reliance on resources and stuff, but at the same time,
the modern day left-hand path
cares?
is extremely focused on like direct gnosis.
Right. Exactly. That's what I meant by who cares.
And I really appreciate this about it, because when somebody says I spoke to Satan or Lilith spoke to me, we, like the people that I run with, nobody puts that under question. Yeah, we can disregard the practitioner later when it's obvious that they have like a mental illness issue or they're like super fucked up on drugs. But we will disregard them as a person, not necessarily the fact that they are in touch with spirits. They're just not an example worth following. But the heavy focus on personal gnosis and direct communication with spirits is a good thing. It's a good thing. It also means that anybody can become an author if they have enough charisma and they want to present their material. This material is highly sought after, the modern day grimoires.
Yeah.
And they can, they can lead people astray, or they can lead people to good places. It's kind of wild. The value of academic authority or proven resources, older resources going back hundreds of years, it just doesn't exist on the left-hand path in the Western occultism. It's like a pioneering spirit that is very individualistic, that draws from living on the edge, from drastic life circumstances. The modern day left-hand path grimoire is a memoir as well, and it is quite in the genre of the Red Dragon, the Great Grimoire. It says madness, insanity is what awaits all geniuses. It's what awaits us at the end, the magicians. So we are the mad Arab of the Necronomicon. It's this archetype of the black magician, and like he is in it for himself, to the edge. He doesn't rely on the brotherhood or the tradition. It's a rogue tradition anyway, because associating was dangerous. It's still kind of ill-advised just because of what black magicians are. Like, they're bad news very often, so we kind of associate at our own peril. We generally don't really form orders anymore. Like, true black magic cults are quite rare. I have only come across a few in my life.
What separates a true black magic cult from a regular black magic cult, or an untrue one, however you want to frame it?
Well, I just tend to judge the force of the current itself, or like the devotion of people, even the dedication, the fanaticism. They take it seriously. Yeah. That's kind of how I would judge it.
Yeah, so seriousness. People, every time people would come to Temple Tahuti in Vancouver from other Golden Dawn temples, they'd always be like, after a day or two, they'd be like, well, you guys are like so hardcore. Like, you guys take this so seriously. Like, you guys, like, I would often have to leave my job after 3 months because of requirements by the temple, or a trip I'd be sent on to go lecture somewhere. And so I would usually not last too long at the shitty little waiter jobs I would take, because that wasn't where my priority was at, if I
And
But
that's the true devotion, and that's what an occultist should be if they are in any way serious. It's not a hobby.
though,
If you want to get somewhere with it, then you have to put it at the top of your priorities, and that of course has massive implications, for your personal life, for your career, for your standing in society.
I would say though, if you need a good hobby, if your life has a hobby shaped hole in it, then magic, you could do worse than magic.
Yeah, sure.
It's a pretty good one, especially if you do it in a healthy way, which is actually not hard to do. Just, you know, follow the advice most people give you. Like, good advice is good advice when both white and black magicians are saying the same thing, for example. Would you agree?
Yeah, no, you can
Look for the
definitely pick
overlap.
up magic or witchcraft, especially as a hobby. You can literally subscribe to witchy boxes that will deliver you a ritual in box every month for the season. So it can be a hobby. You can be a collector of those things. You can be a tarot collector. You can celebrate the wheel of the year. And it doesn't need to overtake your life or eat it up or throw it in a total tailspin. I have noticed that people who base their practice around natural magic, nature and natural cycles, they tend to do well. Like, they're stable.
Yeah. I always say, like, you want to protect yourself from magical attack and from the potential not chaos, but these strains and stresses. There's a word I'm missing that come from deep spiritual work. Garden, go for walks in nature, like, get involved in the physical, earth more, go swimming in the ocean. It's a grounding, what's the popular word these days? Oniric thing? Is that what people are saying? Left hand
Oh,
panty?
I'm not familiar with the fads.
I don't know either. Well, I'm reading the Baron Citadel the last little while, and because I've always had one of the first gods I ever felt called to and devoted to was Gedi, the Loa, and wrote a song dedicated to him. Like, I was really practicing a lot of devotional magic in the 90s to the Loa Gedi, and now there's finally a little new
the
work on
Baron
him.
is fantastic. And like, they are the middle ground. They are neither the hot spirits or the cold spirits, heaven or hell. They are just something else entirely, a third force that is a force of balance that is always just. So, it's, oddly enough, it's also the death cults and the death worship based paths that also can produce stability in people. Santa Muerte, Cain, or the Gede. Black magic necromancers, of course, are not known for, living long and harmonious lives, but it all depends on the approach that you take to it, because necromancy exists also in so many forms, in every civilization out there, in every culture. It's just certain archetypal way of black magician makes the dangerous path, and it cannot be any other way. Like, you cannot do it safely, because that's not how it works.
Probably why I take the white magician necromancer path with a lot of Hail Marys. Yeah, that is a key difference, is just these subtle or maybe they're not so subtle distinctions and approaches that I really enjoy getting to talk to you about. This is why I was excited to have this conversation again, is to understand more of the nuances, because especially as someone, like, I'm very interested in just all people and all humans, how they get through the planet, and whether, like, from the most despicable to the most seemingly divine. It fascinates me. I love humans. I love the planet. I love human life, and to understand, ever increasingly understand what fulfills us, what drives us, what defines us, is, I think, one of the most interesting subjects we can undertake to grasp, because of course, so much insights we get about ourselves by seeing how things are done differently. And what would you say is, like, if you were to define a distinctive difference in approach, as we've just laid out, between the black and the white in this case, what would that be? Because recently I've heard people saying that black magic is the severe pillar and white magic is the merciful pillar, and that's completely the opposite. That makes no sense to me. I've never heard anyone define black magic
Well,
as
the left
Boaz
hand
and
the
white
left
magic
hand
as
path
Yakin.
is a path of blasphemy, and radicalism, opposition, rebellion, burning it down, rejecting material possessions. It's a path of war, could be also said, of self-challenge. But at the end, like all paths lead to Rome. There is only the path. However you start, however you conceive of it, like we all meet at a certain point if we get there. And the labels, they cease to matter.
Yeah, of course.
Of course, there is like our little petty, pet peeves and annoyances, like, the shit that white magicians say about the Black Lodge, the shit that the Black Lodge says about the white magicians. And they like all have a point, but for as long as we both do our work, we always will meet. It's all about doing the work.
Fire walk with me.
For sure. And I although like I have a doubt whether people can form close relationships or marriages when they are like on different paths, because the spirits tend to not like it. And usually one of them tries to dominate the relationship, or the spouse will feel like judged or rejected, or like, oh, you don't want to show me before your friends because you're ashamed of me, or they will like try to convert one another. That's the issue. That's the only issue that I have with it, that since we build all these relationships and the social circles and the narratives around it, or even like fashion choices, visuals, birds of feather flock together. So when when you choose your favorite flavor of the shit sandwich, that's what you're stuck with. And I know that a lot of people like will refuse to hear me out or associate with me or even look at me just because of my association and the choice of aesthetics that follows it and all that stuff. And it kind of saddens me, because just a few years ago it was not known about me at all that I was left-hand path. I was hiding it because of my
beneath druid robes.
Kind of. I was like the good witch, the neighborhood witch, I would never like hail Satan and stuff. Now I do. But it's like, do I have to masquerade or make myself likable to be heard? Well, maybe, but I don't want to do it anymore.
So if someone hails Satan, the adversary, who's then their adversary?
Well, they
I've always wanted to ask
recognize
that.
him as the challenger and the teacher. The enemy is your teacher, it's a martial arts kind of a concept.
I guess
he's not your daddy, he's not Santa Claus to give you stuff, even though that's how some people kind of see it in like a more simplistic devotional aspect. They're like, oh, Lilith and Satan, they're like my father and mother and they protect me, and they like they're just worshippers. But the adversary, of course, is your enemy. He's your challenger. He's not here to soothe you or comfort you.
Yeah, the left-hand path sort of fails to be transgressive if you nerf it too much, eh? Like if you go all Wiccan on it.
And we have this problem, like, where everything from art to subcultures to spirituality becomes emptied because of this pervasive cult of political correctness.
And homogenization and political correctness are
The
definitely
homogenization is
problem.
scary. There used to be such creative spirit in like music subcultures, different hobby subcultures, and it's just blended in this homogenous pool where everybody dresses the same, everybody talks the same, nobody actually has anything original to say anymore. And everybody is afraid of losing their Facebook account for 30 days for saying something that they shouldn't have, that the big brother doesn't like. Because when they're banned from Facebook, then they will not get their dopamine hit. And that's what we are conditioned to seek. And that's a sad state of affairs, right?
You, of course, did you notice that my recent banning off by Meta of all, I got banned off all business tools permanently for Facebook and Instagram because I shared that exoteric Christianity meme, which was a joke.
What?
Yeah.
Oh my God. No.
Yeah.
For
Like
sharing a meme. Well, I gotta.
it shows one
I
path
gotta.
going into a church of light, and that says esoteric Christianity, another path going into a church of darkness says exoteric. It's a joke. Especially, I didn't even post it. I just shared it because it made me laugh, and I
The
thought
thing
might
is
make
that
others
they,
laugh.
you know, they get their and their algorithms, and they judge content based on like false claims. So anything faith-based could be judged as a fraud or offending somebody's religious
Yeah,
beliefs.
me sharing it was
I
harassment.
shared, you cannot share memes about Jonestown. I mean, you can think that it's poor taste to make fun of a mass casualty event, but fuck that, you know, like we have freedom of speech, we have humor. You can't do it because it's taken down as propaganda of radical terrorist organizations, cults. They are killing humor. And without humor, we don't have any way to transgress our petty selves. So social media is a big influence on just, it's killing spirituality.
Amen. Amen. Yeah.
I get banned for nudity every time I forget and I share some illustration depicting the witches' Sabbath.
Oh.
Because there's always a piece of ass or a nipple that I just, you know, I don't look at the world through this prism of censorship. It's not lewd. Like there is nothing obscene about the human body.
Well, you're European. I apologize for this prudish, puritanical culture that you have find yourself in, because you know, I certainly felt that I woke up a lot moving to Vienna when I was 16 and being like, oh, we're still like a bunch of puritanical prudes who are super close-minded by comparison to Europeans. It's like my favorite Oscar
true.
Wilde quote, the
The
civilization
perception of
of decadence.
nudity in art would be a good example, because here it implies pornography or prostitution, or, you know, it's just different. Like we are used to seeing bodies, like statues, paintings. It's everywhere. It's even in the churches. The human form is a basis for all the European art, and USA doesn't really have an art tradition or architecture or culture.
I went with my Gast family in Vienna to Mallorca for winter break, for Easter break, Easter vacation in grade 10. This was 97. And we went to a beach, and the whole family, so it's like the two fellow high schoolers who were the siblings and the parents, everyone got naked and just laid on the beach, completely
Wow,
naked.
must
And
have been a shock to you.
I was there. Oh my, can you imagine seeing a dad and a teenage daughter and a teenage son, and then all just get naked, they go swimming or whatever, and like they're all naked all of a sudden, and I'm like, I start buttoning up my long black trench coat on the beach in Mallorca. I've got lots of pictures to prove it. And I would wander around and look for tall promontories of orange sand, rock to climb up to and invoke the sylphs and write poems. That's what I would do. But sure enough, everywhere I looked, everyone was naked. I was just like, this is a different thing. And yeah, I don't know. It's a shame that we can't appreciate.
But see, your experience is a perfect example of the sheer need to transgress our cultural conditioning.
Yeah,
Because
I
that's
got
what
over
we're
myself
born with. That's what we are stuck with.
eventually.
And for, you know, if you have never traveled, if you have never confronted yourself with something outside of your culture, then how do you even know that everything you believe in is real and it's the correct thing or the only thing? Even for me to move here, like I had to accept a completely different mindset. And it's a painful process, because you get asked hundreds of times by cab drivers, where are you from? That's kind of an American thing. Everybody asks you, where are you from? Because it's such a big place. And I had problems answering that question. Like, how exactly you answer that question when you're an immigrant who sort of, landed on a rock bottom series of life choices that led somewhere where you didn't want to go, moving through 5 different states in a year. So where are you from actually? Can't go back to Europe anymore. So where are you from? And that's a very mystical question.
Mm.
And it hurts to be thrown out of your element and from your self-perception. I was separated from my story.
Mm.
So I tried different answers. I was like, you know what? I don't even know anymore. Or like, I guess I'm a traveler. Then I said, oh, I'm from Oregon. Then I said, oh, I'm from New York. I tried answering this question multiple ways, kind of experimenting with what sticks. And then I stopped caring because I realized that the answer, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter where I'm from, aka who I am. Like, why? I don't judge myself. Nobody will judge me either. Their curiosity is innocent, and me taking it personally and like rehashing my whole trauma of being an undocumented immigrant, that's on me. So it kind of cured me, from that lost identity.
Yeah. Yeah. Huh. It's I find myself unprepared to grapple with those. These are some major questions. Maybe I can we can percolate that in the back of the brain for a minute and ground down with some book talk. If you don't mind. Of the, as we were talking about the grimoires coming out, especially in the LHP community, Black Magic community, however, whatever subgroups you want to think, what ones would you say? How does someone? And again, I'm not looking to get into them, of course, because it's just not my cup of tea. I got plenty of my own books to read, too many. But I'm curious about it, and I'm curious about how people within your community and these communities distinguish between the good stuff and the bad stuff, the authentic grimoires that are considered, must have, super awesome magical books, and the ones that are pejoratively referred to in the words of our dearly departed Jake Stratton Kent, dark fluff. And also, do you find the term dark fluff offensive when it comes to referring to certain books?
I find it to be like a right-hand path term, dark fluff.
Except it came from Jake Stratton Kent, so it's from within the left-hand path community of Goetic magicians. So he's identifying things within his own community that he considers silly. And for me, looking from the outside, I can never tell which of these books that I see out there are sort of, which ones I don't know. I don't have the tool set to identify.
Well, you'd have to like get in. Here's the thing, like I used to be passionate about like judging books and campaigning for what is authentic and like bashing with my own reviews that which was fluff. But that's me 10, 15 years ago. And I'm a different person. I don't even read anymore. I get like a little bit of scanned material here and there from other practitioners when we get into a conversation and they want to show me something, but I have not read an actual book for ages, and I won't, because I constantly move around, so I need to keep all of my material possessions to a minimum. So these kinds of intellectual wars, like I'm way beyond it. To me, like to maintain a library like you have, so I've been living out of 2 suitcases for the past 2 years, and here you have with this library, this collection. So you're asking like a gypsy vagrant about something that they have not seen in a long time, a library. Wow.
Yeah, that's
well,
fair.
I just get my journal.
You haven't been
That's
doing
what
that.
I
Yeah.
have. And that's sort of how we are, it's a more rogue path. So they will usually have a few things that they consider like the shit, and then they like try to get into it and practice it and walk through it. It's more, the black magic grimoire is considered more like a personal talisman of power. Like there is actual force current flowing through that book.
Well, we see the same thing with our grimoires, of course. I think I would call that any grimoires that qualify that would be the ones I would call the, let's not, authentic's not the right word, but the
it's the
good
word
shit.
of mouth though, and the more obscure the material, often the better.
Of course,
There
sometimes.
is no authority, there is no like circus review for for books of black magic. And some are still circulated um in like a rogue way, illicitly. It's a part of the appeal of secret knowledge. Like if it can be obtained easily, then it can't be so good.
I don't think that's always true. I think that's sometimes true. Like there's a lot of really easily obtainable knowledge that might be the best thing you could ever hear in your life. For example, let me give you this one. Love yourself and love others. Really easy to get knowledge. Probably underrated.
Practice difficult. Yeah, that's what Jesus said, love thy neighbor like you love yourself. So when you don't have self-love, it's gonna be difficult.
So that's super accessible. You'll hear it everywhere if you leave the house, especially in certain places or towns or countries. And it's easy to ignore, but it might be the most important thing you'll ever hear in your life. And more interestingly, perhaps it might be the hardest thing you ever try and do, if you even try at all. I know for me, one of the reasons that I like Christianity is because it challenges me more than any religion I've ever could imagine coming across. Though a lot of religions have the exact same challenge within them, and that is but specifically in Christianity, the challenge of forgiveness and not seeking vengeance on people. That to me is the hardest fucking thing I've ever had to do in my life, and it's a constant progress, it's a constant labor, and it will never end as long as I'm alive, because people will always do you wrong. People will always sin against you, and you will always sin. And since we're all sinners, we basically need to forgive ourselves and forgive others.
Yeah, and we need
Otherwise,
to
I
be
think we're
kind to
fucked.
each other. That's what the depictions of hell show us, where people are seated by the table, with this giant bowl of soup, but their forks and their spoons are so long that they cannot feed themselves. They can only feed their neighbor. So it's like, how do we get collectively out of hell? Well, by being there for each other, brothers and sisters.
In
We are
your
forced to cooperate to get out.
Yeah, that's of course uh, one of the greatest stories I think I heard as a kid. It sticks with all of us, I think. The long spoon story, right? Um, and back to the circles of hell. In one of your articles on your website, which will be linked, of course, for those below, you talk about with a friend needing to move from pride to lust. Why would lust be a better
Why?
place to live than pride?
Well, the rings of hell are not created equal. And in traditional theology, some inclinations are considered to be more natural, more human. It's what connects us to the animals. Everybody will always have some inclination of lust because we need to procreate. So lust is actually considered the most shallow ring of hell, whereas pride is the deepest one. That's where the spiritual self-delusion and entitlement sets in. That's where you become blind to your own actions. So it's seen as more of a choice, a bad choice, and then you can instigate others into it. And I think the order of the rings is this: it's lust, excess or like gluttony, greed follows. And then from there it gets worse, you know, that there you have wrath, violence, vengeance, treachery, and the false prophets, you know, and the ring of pride, where Lucifer himself reigns, because that's considered to be the mother of all sins.
So why was your friend was talking in the article about the benefits you would like, the need for it seems she was saying almost like both of you needed to go from pride into lust, and because
Yeah,
lust is this animalistic primal
well,
quality we
because
all have.
unless you seek to leave hell entirely, you will always be partially mired in it because of your human nature. And that's actually what Lucifer told me the same recently. He said, look, it's basically almost pointless in my eyes to trying to leave the ring of lust entirely, because it's a part of your animalistic human nature. So why don't you just see it as a lounge? Like, this is the airport lounge, and you can smoke a cigar here and you can be fine, because if you don't have the inclination to submerge deeper, it's not a vice for you, then you can just enjoy it. But, you know, some of those other vibrations, they tend to suck you in faster. Like engaging in vengeance or violence has like a cumulative effect. And it's well attested to, you know, in numerous stories. You know how in the movies, they always try to resolve one situation by killing someone, and then there's like a whole bunch of corpses, you know, hidden beneath the carpet, and it's obvious that it will never be possible to go back or get out anyway. The movie Fargo comes to mind. It starts with somebody's one bad idea motivated by greed, and, you know, from greed you get sucked into wrath, violence, and then you're just like making one stupid decision after another, which is pride, and then it ends with the mass disaster. So you know, stories like that show the progress of like how it happens. How do you get sucked into hell, and how do you recreate hell for yourself and others around here?
Yeah, well, I definitely believe we create hell in this world. I mean, maybe that's the idea, that's certainly Kenneth Grant's idea of the tunnels of Set, and the Klipot, right? He talks about how there wouldn't be tunnels of Set, which are pathways between the Klipothic Sephira, unless we created them. Kenneth Grant's view is that we create those tunnels. We're the ones who even connect dark forces together, or the husks together, to form a network of shadow, or however.
And I have seen these tunnels. Like, I had visions, very vivid ones, of kind of being bussed around between these different Cliffotic realms of hell. So I know that they exist.
Well,
I
they
mean, they
definitely
have
exist.
to, because how else would we move between those places?
In my studies and work with Klippa, the experience was that they don't even, and they don't manifest spiritually, they manifest physically. So
Oh, they do. Absolutely. You know,
whereas the
I
work of the
remember.
physicals to evolve spiritually, perhaps the work of the Klippo and Klippas is to, in some ways, and from some points of view, manifest from the spiritual into the physical. And
I've certainly been there. You know, I was sitting on a bus in Eugene, Oregon, and suddenly I was overwhelmed with this feeling that like I am being bussed around from like one place in hell to another, kind of as a process of gradual release. And all the people around me, well, not only they were physically kind of like convicts and people from the lowest strata of society, but they started talking, and it all felt like we're actually all in hell, and they're describing to me how it works. They're like, oh, there's somebody's piss on the floor. Don't step into somebody else's piss or you will stink. And I'm like, yeah, that's good life advice, right? Right there. Then some other man was like, yeah, my court hearing is today at 3 p.m. I'm like, yo, are we all like on our way to premature release from hell? It was very real. It was not like a vision or a dream or a symbol. It was like I was there. And those people were there, and they all like looked and smelled and acted exactly how you would picture people in hell would. And I think the public transport is a good place to see hell in the United States.
And now in Vancouver too, we have our crimes up 54%. Stabbings on the buses, kids getting people just randomly stabbing people. Some guy outside of a Starbucks just down the street the other week asked this guy to stop vaping in front of his daughter, and the guy just stabbed him in front of his daughter and bled out there. The videos, it's horrible. It's just
and that's hell, that's how you know that it's not some other place, that this random violence, the ring of wrath, that it does overlap our reality. The insanity and the suffering of those people when you bump into them on the street, like the homeless crisis, you're brushing shoulders with that vibration. Those people, they are insane. They're seeing different things. They're somewhere else. You just pass next to them and they'll start threatening you.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've never I used the Golden Dawn Temple in Vancouver was in Gastown, a tourist area, which is on the border of heaven and hell, because we got all the beautiful touristy stuff on one side, and then all the the intersection where there is more drug use per capita than anywhere else in the entire world, still to this day. And the I never felt unsafe, not once. I would walk amongst everyone. I'd walk through the alleys, the darkest of the drug using, never felt unsafe. And I wasn't unsafe. I mean, someone might have tried to rob me with a needle if I got really unlucky, but that was about the worst of things I would have to face. And most of the time, people just ignore you. Everyone's in their own little space, whatever. I was in heaven. Some of them were in hell, and we all occupied the same, 4-block radius. But now I do feel unsafe. Now I don't take, but if I can take an Uber instead of a bus, I do, just because I want to have a slightly higher percentile chance of not being killed. It's a minuscule chance. I might sound crazy and paranoid, but
these realities are collective as well as individual, and you can see this collective element of hell really manifesting itself in American cities.
Yeah. Yeah, well,
like you cannot escape it anymore. It used to be that it was just some neighborhoods, and if you were in the good neighborhood, it was okay. But now there's so many homeless in every major city in this country that they take over the neighborhoods.
It's so weird that not letting people work for 2 years would cause homelessness.
Right.
Like, we saw this coming. As soon as they stopped us from working, it's like there's going to be homelessness and mass crime. Now we're seeing the beginning of like the mass crime, and we saw it. It's so bad. It's so bad. This is under the theme of PC culture or just hell in the world? It's all one theme, isn't it? Damn.
Well, it is, and like I'm a byproduct of these changes as well, because my immigration case is stuck in a queue that is 3 years long. So how do they expect us to survive for 3 years with no papers, no work permit, no health insurance, nothing? That's pretty infernal when you think about it.
Yeah.
And there's tens of thousands of us, and then there's everybody else who was stuck in every other government bureaucratic loop trap. So I think on a collective level, hell has been manifesting more visibly in recent years. Like it wants itself to be known. Like it doesn't want to be ignored anymore.
Yeah. Well, we have the same problem, unfortunately, up here with our leader, Satan's gimp, Trudeau. Not letting he's like literally is not letting us build homes. Like it does feel like, I hate the phrase controlled demolition, but it just feels like it. It's just like that's what it is. And I don't know why, other than for some elite globalist control over all of us undesirables as pod people and eaters. It seems like that's really what's happening. But I hate being pessimistic about it. I want to be optimistic. I want to look for things we can do. And so many people, more and more people, it seems, that I talk to are like, you really got to stop thinking about all this stuff and just do whatever you want and be happy. And I think, and
Well,
I'm like, I
we
think
live
that's
in
the
the dark
problem.
age. We live in the age of Kali Yuga, exactly as advertised.
Well, it's supposed to be over. Kali Yuga is supposed to be over. It's
Is
supposed to
it
have ended
though?
in
Is it?
1900. And Rudolf Steiner said
Oh,
the Maitreya Bodhisattva returned in the
whoa.
30s in
Well,
the form
but
of
is
Valentin
he
Tomberg, perhaps.
right? I don't know. Well, from what I've been seeing, Kali Yuga is pretty much out there and well.
Yeah, right. It's funny how Rudolf Steiner thought the beginning of the 20th century would be this great time of the higher selves ruling human consciousness. So the higher self, which Steiner sees as the I, ego, the I self is the higher self, and it would emerge and lead people into the next stage. But what of course happened was it emerged in the form of Ubermenschen trying to declare themselves as the higher selves and everyone else as the lower selves, of course. So if the higher self did manifest as the ich, the ego, the I self, it quickly decided, well, it can't, some of us are higher selves and the rest are lower selves, and let's get rid of the lower ones. And we had a century of war unlike any other. So
We are living in interesting times, as the Chinese curse says.
I mean, my thinking is that when these new energies manifest, like when we see with astrological cycles or even spiritual cycles, like entering the sphera and having to work through the husk or the shell first, right? Or in some sort of dialectic with the divine attribute. It's similar, like when with the Pluto transiting that's going on right now, like death in Aquarius. Like Aquarius is this androgynous, authoritarian, humanitarian sign, and Pluto's this death ball, just saying, "Ooh, androgyny and death, let's do it." Often the negative comes out first. Often we have to get rid of the husk and the shell before we get the mana.
It's
And
the turning of the ages for sure, you know. Pluto in Capricorn 300 years ago launched the American Revolution and the end of the aristocratic systems to be replaced by parliamentary democracy. And now it's being replaced by something else again.
who knows? Yeah, well, the war is on. I mean, it is. In the 90s when no one wanted, we never said like evil. We're like, no, just say negative. It's just negative. It's not evil. And it's like, war's not like bad. It's just like lots of people dying really fast. And that's negative, but
I like that.
do you remember that sort of kind of, we were trying to nerf spirituality in the new age just a little bit. And now it's hard to even think that way when you see like, yeah, blatant, just, yeah, I mean, everything. I mean, everything. You don't even need to say it anymore, that which is such a sign of the times. Where's the hope, Anima? Where's the hope? Give me some
Where
hope.
is the hope? Well, it's the struggle for progress. It's the Darwinian struggle that you must embrace as the purpose of life, the meaning of life. That's kind of my personal answer to it, because I'm Luciferian and I see Lucifer as the spirit of progress at the cost of struggle. It's just going forward, not just winning, also losing. Keep moving.
Well, we see that there's some hope. I mean, we do see
Discard the
hope.
hope. Don't ask for hope. There is no hope. It's a
There's
fight.
no hope. Well, you see, there I sort of agree with you. I always like the idea of, when Christ's disciples were like, what do we do about this horrible situation of the world and the poor and the wars? And oh, no, 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 no. And then there's Midianites. Oh my God. Canaanites too, perhaps. And the Moabites. Don't forget the Moabites. And Jesus like, nothing. You can't do anything about it.
Right?
He said, just love, and that you create sort of, enter the kingdom of God, all these good things. Use the good oils. He said, use the good oils on my feet and hair, because all of this will pass away. And it will.
Right?
And the best thing
Yeah.
we probably can do for those coming after is just love ourselves, love them. And then our turn ends and others turns begin. Then maybe our turn returns.
The eternal return.
Apparently, I didn't realize this, but stats from like 20 years ago showed that like 20 to 35% of Roman Catholics in the States believe in reincarnation.
They do. There always has been a high incidence of this belief among Catholics everywhere where these polls were conducted. My parents were Catholic and they believed in reincarnation.
Yeah, I never met any Catholics that believe in reincarnation, so I was very surprised to read that recently. And you'd think that with that being the case, that the church might, do something with that. They might say something. They might, but I guess they don't. They don't want to encourage people to focus on the wrong things, whatever that is. Focus on the next life, which I think is good. I think it's not good to focus on the next terrestrial life, if there is one, and not to get lost in the ones that you think were the past.
There's a certain logic to it. I get it. Not everybody should be studying their past lives, but a lot of people look there for answers.
Yeah, I can certainly respect the spiritual process and the therapeutic value of some of that sort of stuff, for sure. Daniel Rekshan, who I've talked to, does interesting framing work and dream work with that kind of stuff, and he looks at it though not as veritable knowledge. He doesn't look at the past life work, it seems, as like this is a historical fact, you were this person. It's more of a, I don't know the language he uses, especially as a dream.
Yeah, but he analyzes it such as you would work with, archetypes with tarot or interpreting dreams.
Right. The idea of reincarnation in sort of in principal powers, like people, and also like people reflecting certain principles within your life is something I can very empathetic to, that, like seeing people fulfill different archetypal roles in your world. I mean, that's sort of psychology, that's Jungian psychology 101, right?
Sure. And it's true though, like it's true because we do embody the same characters over and over, we visit the same places, we engage with the same people, so we are essentially embodying archetypes. It's never just about that one story. It's about choices that you repeat over and over, and then it becomes a pattern, and then these patterns form who you are. You're a teacher. You have been a teacher many times before.
Yeah, I like to think that this is my only life.
I can already tell. Okay, well, if you ever want a past life clairvoyant reading,
I mean,
I can do that for you.
Like, I was raised on that stuff, like fundamentalists are raised on speaking in tongues and or charismatic worship. Like that was a thing we did, like to go to another psychic to learn about all the different people you were and what might happen in the future. It was that was my common life experience growing up. That was what my mom was into. So, and I didn't find any of those insights to ever be helpful. Contrary, I found them to
we have
be
to rebel
incredibly
against our
destructive.
parents and what they believed in. So, of course, if your mother was into spiritualism or New Age, you're going to either become a communist or an atheist or a born-again Christian.
And I didn't become any of
different
those.
trajectories. I had a guest on my show, The Devil's Disciples, whose mother was a madrina in Santeria. And he was just like so tired as a teenager of all these worship rituals, all these altars, all these ceremonies, that he said, fuck ceremonies, fuck traditions. I'm just going to be a chaos magician or something else. So we all get these trajectories where we start out in life and then we have to rebel against it and find our way, against the flow. And but I have gotten to appreciate a lot of it later in life, much later.
It seems risky though, telling kids who they were in past lives and telling them what lessons they learned or needed to learn, because they latch onto it and they hyper focus on it, and they start letting those things define them. And really these are just, these might be psychical impressions of a high order, but they
I
also
I
might
don't
be just.
I don't have like a moral position on treating with children or, teenagers, because I only deal with adults.
No, I just thought it would be interesting to see what your thoughts are on that, as and tease it out, sort of, um the pros and cons of
I
that.
don't know how I would deal like with, with the younger ones.
Yeah.
Their psyche is not fully formed yet, so maybe it could be disturbing for them. But my services and my workshops were never sought out in any large numbers by people younger than in their 30s, mostly way older, like 40s and plus. So
Yeah,
I'm no expert in like how do you raise children. I guess that's every parent's choice, in the
yes,
end,
it
how they
is.
choose to indoctrinate them
Right,
and how
right.
successful they become at it. Obviously, your mother failed. My parents have failed in some ways, succeeded in others, because here I am studying Dante's Inferno, 20 years later, after I became an apostate from the Catholic Church. So I am rediscovering the tradition many years later.
It's very ironic, isn't it?
And they believed in reincarnation, and I thought for the longest time that it's like old wives' tales and hippie bullshit and just my father's stories that he would use to, impress women. And then I realized many years later that, wow, like everything that he was saying is actually true. I just had to come to it from my own discovery. Because I used to think that all of this is like stories that people entertain themselves at parties, because it was like
Yeah.
the man hitting on me. Oh, we were practicing sex magic together in the times of the Yellow Emperor. Do you remember? And I'm like, yeah, bro, with you, I'm certain. No, not in the past life, not in this one, not in the future.
Yes, pick up lines to avoid.
Right? That's what I thought of it for the longest time, until I gained the ability myself. And I worked with someone who had it, and I thought it was very impressive. And I got convinced through my own experimentation that what he's seeing, I could verify it for myself. And then I was like, I want to have this ability. Like, I want to see the past, not just mine, but other people's. And I acquired it. And well, boy, it's become an influence on my life, because imagine when that stuff keeps coming up spontaneously, not just when you put yourself in trance or do some procedure ceremony, but like you see those images all the time.
Should we wrap up with something then?
Sure, sure.
I'll clip out this last couple minutes and avoid us diving headlong into another full topic. So I'll clip that, and then we'll do this little thing. I don't usually do that, but it makes sense in this case. What should we wrap up with? What's a good thing?
Hey, you know how you like to end your show.
Okay. That's fair enough. Fair enough. Um, huh. Well, we could always do a little thing on do you want to talk about some advice? Do you want to talk about advice for newbies on the path?
Oh no, no, not that question.
You
I'm
want to
not
talk
gonna
about,
answer that. It
you don't like
sucks.
that? All right. What must have black grimoires for black magicians?
No, I don't read books. I told
I
you
know you don't,
twice.
but you
You
must
you
know.
refuse to accept this act of barbarism, but I truly don't read. Can you imagine?
I
And I
can, because
and
I
I
didn't
don't wear a bra also.
I didn't read for like 15 years myself when I was being a musician. So I totally get it. I totally get it. I'm just I'm you have a wide ranging expertise, and you have a lot of experience with also writers and these sort of things. So I just have this deep belief that I have a suspicion that you have an idea of
No, I
some
get it.
good
Yeah,
stuff.
I Yeah, you like to ask for advice for newbies and for recommendation for books. But that's, yeah.
Well, those are questions I get. Those are when I tell people I'm interviewing someone and ask for questions. Those are the kinds of things
Yeah,
people
that's
are
what they
curious
want to
about.
know. Yeah,
Because
we
because
can try to
because
answer it.
especially on this podcast, where often it's me and other experts talking
Mhm.
at higher levels, and a lot of times people are like,
Mhm.
"Where do I start though to get to a place
Yeah,
where I understand
yeah.
what you two are talking about?"
Yeah, I get it. I understand.
Yeah. Well, we can wrap up however you want. It's been lovely talking with you again. I really enjoyed this conversation. This is
Okay, well,
this has been fun.
um,
Do you want to tell people maybe just about your website and the work you're doing and
yeah,
what
yeah.
the vision
Of,
is behind it,
sure. No, I
perhaps?
would like to say something about my work.
Yeah, let's do. I'm very interested. The new website looks amazing,
Thank you.
beautifully done, and that's Anima dash Noira at art.
Yes.
www. Yeah, it'll
And it, and
link below.
it's got a lot of written materials, all of my essays, short stories, poems,
Yeah,
related to the occult, but also, you know, of a different kind, because I'm a writer, apart from being an occultist. Um, I do use it to post extras for my show, The Devil's Disciples, there, because not everything is publishable on social media these days. I got recently flagged for hate speech. So if you want to listen to some Black magicians' hate speech, that's also to be found on my website, as is modeling portfolio. That's also unpublishable in some cases, like the rendering of the Witch's Sabbath um, that I did. I like to recreate like scenes from the past or my fantasy, my imagination in my photo shoots. And I also have made my spiritual services, my skills available for the public as a part of my ministry. So it's all out there. It went live on Walpurgisnacht this year, brand new. And, you know, you're welcome to hit me up, comment, or follow me across the social media. I'm pretty present there, like daily: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and of course the live streamed show on YouTube.
yeah. Great work you've been doing in your field, and it's been interesting to see it develop. So you do cover a lot of interesting topics on your podcast that people should check out, especially interested in black magic. The packs is an interesting thing to me because it's done. Packs are a thing with white and black magicians, with all magicians. Any kind of time we work with spirits, there's some sort of pact occurring, whether it's explicit or ad hoc, and so that's always an interesting thing, because one thing we have in common is dealing with spirits, and that's something that even people like Rudolf Steiner or Valentin Tomberg considered the most essential thing, is how to communicate with spirits, which is why I find it very ironic that Rudolf Steiner rejected evocational magic, Goetia, and the long history of human technology that is explicitly designed to communicate with spirits. It's funny, right? He's like, the most important thing is communicating with spirits, and I reject all human methods of doing so. Now listen to my clairvoyant insights on it. Like, that was sort of the irony of Steiner and these anthroposophist take on this stuff. And it's a shame, because how we interact with these spiritual creatures is one of the most interesting things in the world to me. And yeah, we all do it. We all do it, whether we define it the same way or not. So yeah, it's been great
Let's
getting
keep
to
doing it.
let's keep doing it. And I wish you all the best on your path and your journey, and best of luck with, especially, the situation of finding some sort of stability in the country you're in. I know we all want that these days, so I really hope that comes together. I know it will. You're a magician. You can tweak things, fix it in post.
Thank you. I shall.
All right. Thanks for being here, and thanks for listening, everybody. Peace.